Welcome to Miami Beach Urban Studios Live Art Talks. Today we're with GeoVanna Gonzalez. My name is Colette Mello. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank Miami Beach Department of Tourism and Office of Cultural Affairs for sponsoring these art talks. GeoVanna Gonzalez is an artist and curator that is based in Miami and Berlin. Her practice includes interventions, performances, and poetry readings, as well as sculptures and video work. Her work references gender, identity, and intimacy, as well as her interest in activating space and the community. She is a two-time Oolite Ellie winner and a Wave Maker winner. She's been exhibited at the Bass Museum, Prez Art Museum Miami, Fringe Projects, and ICA. She is currently on view at the NSU Museum in Fort Lauderdale and the Tile Blush Gallery in the Miami Design District. In addition, GeoVanna is the founder and curator of Supplemental Projects, which is an alternative art space in Miami. Before I hand it over to GeoVanna, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that if you have any comments or questions, to make them through the chat function, and we will get to them throughout our conversation throughout GeoVanna's presentation. Hi, GeoVanna. Thank you for agreeing to be part of our art talk.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very excited to meet everyone. I will say virtual talks are a difficult thing, so please feel free to intervene, leave any comments, questions, suggestions, whatever it may be. Otherwise, it might get a little boring.
We'll we ask questions throughout. First of all, tell us where you are.
I'm currently at my studio at Bakehouse Art Complex, which is an amazing studio space with about 60 artists in total. There's a lot of facilities here, and I recommend people to definitely come by if you haven't been here before. It's been around for a very long time.
I love the space.
So yeah, I guess I can go ahead and start my presentation if that works for you.
Yep. Go ahead and start.
Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and skip over this for now since you did such a nice job with the introduction. I've been in Miami for about 3 years now. I was formerly living in Berlin for 4 years straight, and now I kind of fluctuate between the two places. Although because of COVID, I've been in Miami this whole entire year, which is kind of a new thing for me. I want to start with going over some of my most recent past works to kind of give you an overview, I guess, of what I've mostly been focusing on in the most recent years. So first is this project called Aesthetics and Mobility, which this is a collaboration with my partner, Naja Moon. And we started this at the beginning of the quarantine, mostly because we had this moment of pause to sort of reflect on the work we had done inside of our home, which is actually a box truck, so a tiny house, if you will. Inside of what is essentially a U-Haul truck, if you can imagine a sort of space like that. And in this, we developed this conversation series that's in a video format that's called Aesthetics and Mobility. So I'll go ahead and start one of the trailers. And I guess a little bit of backstory with that, with this conversation series, what we're interested in doing is one, sort of dissecting all the different components in the home and thinking about them conceptually, but also it's a lot of us just maybe talking back and forth to each other about our different opinions.
Hello, testing 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. Yeah. We're good. Within the celebration of the erotic in all our endeavors, my work becomes a conscious decision. a longed for a bed which I entered gracefully, and from which I rise up empowered.
So for this episode specifically, we were focusing on the bed, and the bed is, we created a Murphy bed within our space, which while it's up, it also turns into what is our dining room table. And you can watch the full episode online on YouTube on Aesthetics of Mobility, but essentially we just kind of have a conversation back and forth on that decision making of whether or not we wanted a Murphy bed or the different styles of doing so, what's the importance of like rest, how much time we actually spend in bed, and kind of thinking of the history more specifically, and then also our own personal memories and ideas around that. So the next piece I want to talk about is a video commission that's called Exotic Naps. That was from, so basically the ICA Museum commissioned me to do this. And for this piece specifically, I was looking back at, you know, past notebooks and sketchbooks and reflecting on them and creating this sort of stream of consciousness poem. And in the video, you hear me reading the poem that I created from combining all of these notes or even quotes from different books or lectures or people, and then collaging footage that I was taking for a few weeks in order to make this film.
Exotic naps. Fluorescent tubes, welded steel planes and cubes. Disregarded auto body parts or chains. Leather garments. Physicality. Mango jam, queer drawings, the radical act of doing nothing. Put some jewels on that bitch. I was headed in the right direction, it seems, but I don't know what happened. Hanging high color gradient built inside of a shed. What? Why? Nothing. Build with 12 or navigate 4. Marks, visa, labor. Projection mapping. Updates. Dispute, FedEx charges, and insurance charges. What we perceive isn't always what something is. The lighting on your phone. Install and deinstall of labor. Spray painted joints. Water issues. The word sacred means set apart. Black Chevy 2002, and a bed mattress for people to lay down. What time is it? Next location. A steel rectangle pool filled with water. Intro. Delete the lighter. Translation as manipulation, not in italics. Drill holes, place pins, level the floor. An egg. Buildings, memories, pathways. Falling. Let her know by tomorrow. No editing or putting things together. Single moments. What is this one thing doing? It's jumping off. 1 bag of cement, 2 bags of sand, 3 black picture frames, 1 bag of acrylic fiber, already spent. Void if detached. Exploring issues of memory and loss of textiles and narratives. Certificates of the objects. Make a box then cover it in transparent camo using leftovers. Talk, conversation, personal expressions. Sitting in a circle amongst the visitors. Having a set of questions. Fear of speaking. Labor in the creative field. What are the other options? Being able to survive? Play the game. There is no gap between what we are, what we do, and what we are becoming. Quote, how does one afford to work for free? Seeing beyond the world of exchange. Photo of hands in the grass. Sunstroke colors. MIDI drum patterns. Thinking through association. Will I not be remembered during this time? Thinking through visibility. Pathways to encounter. Maybe by scrolling through the space that might be enough for a visitor to get a sense of what's going on. Perceiving it through the body. The landscape is a collage of ideas, appear, reappear, and echo. To lose oneself only to find a route that shapes the subject matter, the sense of being. Throughout the room, a place to stray. It's a way to turn thinking into a space and vice versa. Black sand, sound, it will go away. Thousands of squares, not one grain of dust. Sitting doing nothing. Don't stop to ask questions. Days have days to days of senselessness. Just the idea of being elsewhere. Exotic.
That's fantastic.
So thank you. Yeah, so for this piece, it was also sort of made during this time of in the beginning of the pandemic. So I think there's a little bit of that sort of feeling that's naturally incorporated into the narrative in some way, but I think more than anything, a lot of this video is kind of showing this immense amount of, I guess, thoughts or ideas that I've had for a long time, and having a moment to then release it all within this one film. So yeah, it's both collaging and also collaging both with words and collaging both with imagery. And I think that in some way, a lot of my other works do the same thing. So I wanna go ahead and move forward unless anyone has any comments or suggestions.
I really liked the visual with the poetry. That was really, I haven't seen that in a long time, so that was really great.
Thank you.
Snaps.
I have a
So-
comment. It says,
Yeah, go for it.
love the thin strips of landscape.
Thanks. So in December, I did a collaboration with another artist and designer named GeoVanna Gonzalez, and we created a body of work under the name Unresolved. And this work was shown for Design Miami 2020. And essentially what we were, I guess what sprung up a lot of the inspiration for this work was kind of reflecting and exploring the narrative around like, what is work, what is labor, how do you integrate inclusion and equality in that, but also really sort of getting inspiration from industrial objects and then making them our own. And so these are two pieces that are part of that collection. And these are a few more. The one on the left specifically, I think I gravitate a lot to in the sense that it originated from a sort of step stool, but then kind of enlarging it, and then it becomes something completely different. You know, it's no longer an ideal step stool, but more so maybe a bench or a resting place, a place for gathering. You can fit about 4 people at a time on this. So like what it means to use similar language of pre-existing objects, but then change their functionality completely. And so I think that for a lot of the works in this collection, we did that.
Do you want to talk about, I know when we had talked, you had mentioned that you used to paint when you were in grad school, and then you worked in different medium. Now you're using, you mentioned you were working in welding.
Yeah, so I guess I haven't gone to grad school, but I did go for undergrad. And in undergrad, yeah, I did study painting. That was kind of like my main focus in terms of medium. Which clearly that is not anymore, but I think that painting, and I think about painting now through color. I think about the different surfaces and textures. that I can utilize color in within the more three-dimensional work, structural works that I'm making. Yeah, so there's been like a huge shift since that time in terms of the representation of how my work gets executed.
And I have a comment. I notice your sculptures are often monumental. Are they ever intended to live permanently outdoors?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a few pieces that will be outdoors. One of them specifically will be permanently outdoors. I have done some temporary outdoor pieces. So yeah, they're meant to function both indoors and outdoors. Sometimes it's temporary.
Thank you.
So this piece here is called When We Open Every Window, which I originally made this installation in Berlin about 2 summers ago. And for this piece, I was thinking about a few things. One specifically that sparked the sort of jumping point of it was reflecting on my great grandmother's house, which is in Inglewood, California. And her home is sort of the place that everybody gathered at, like that was the meeting point always. And it's been around forever, and it's also where every party, every gathering that you can imagine within my family happened in this house specifically. And it's important to me in the sense that I found comfort there, but also coming to the sort of realization now at the time when I made this that how much that has influenced me in the way that I move through space and the way that I kind of come in community with other people. And it started in this home. And so like this piece isn't necessarily a realistic representation of her home, but more of what my memory thinks of. And I think that comes through with all the vibrant colors. And I think about the colors representing people in terms of like the vibrancy, the sort of liveliness of everything, and the openness that the home had. And I think this is true for a lot of my family members' houses, in that there is a lot of openness always, whether that be with doors open, windows open. It's a sense of cleansing the space, but also an invitation to kind of join in. So with that, I put together a few programmings for this install that was more of a reflection of my life right now. And then I really wanted to go ahead and do a rendition of this in Miami. So then Commissioner is an organization here in Miami that invited me to do a project with them. And just a little backstory of Commissioner, if you don't know already, they're a members-based organization, and it's a way for people that maybe haven't collected art before to learn how to do so, and also to support local artists. So they do an editions piece for their members at that given time. So I was one of their artists most recently, and I wanted to, one, think about redoing this piece in a more performative way, but also specifically for Commissioner, what the members received was a condensed size version of the structure itself, which all fit with inside of a box. So on top of that, for the main day, what I did was have this live performance with a few local artists here in Miami, also good friends of mine. And this video you can also find, I can send a link in the chat online. So Plele A is a structure that has existed in many different formats, and that's kind of the intention in the work. And so specifically when I made this, I was thinking about, two things primarily. One, how do I represent multiplicity as a queer person, but also as a person of color, and how do I share that have that shared narrative with other people and represent that within my work. The other is I was looking at this like Victorian French design that's called a tête-à-tête, which is two chairs that are side by side, but the chairs are facing in opposite direction. And in doing more research about this, you know, I kind of came to the realization that this was really a space for lovers to meet in a public setting that was in a very discreet way. So almost as if you weren't supposed to. And how that created this architectural form or this design form created somehow a safe space, if you will. So I wanted to take that and use that within this structure. So for this first iteration of Playlay A, it's a huge sort of tête-à-tête. So it's more than just for 2 people, but for 10 people. And this was commissioned by the Bass Museum, and the first sort of program that went along with this was a poetry reading that I did in partnership with This Girl's Lunchbox and FemPower. And then the second rendition of that was also at the Bass Museum, but it was a different format, and I reconfigured the structure since it is all modular into a different form. And for this, I invited this sort of voguing performance to happen that was performed by the House of Ninja, which they're local here in Fort Lauderdale, to kind of then use another form of expression to talk about this work again. And that's kind of been the continuation of this work in general. So for the third act of it, I was invited by the Commuter Biennial to then show this work again. And this was outdoors, and this was underneath the Brickell Metro Station. And it was a one-day performance, and it was a durational performance that was 2 hours long. And I worked with this performer named Sydney Ryben, and she went through the structure while there was a musician named Battery Power playing, and they were communicating with each other through these different mediums simultaneously throughout the whole entire space and the structure itself. And the most recent one is currently on view at NSU Art Museum, and that's for the consortium show. And it will be coming down, I believe, February 20th. And this one I was really interested in. Well, I think a lot of it, the concept comes from the fact that right now there's a lot of spaces that we can't go to because of the pandemic, and one being the Queer Club, a very specific one. And I think over the most recent months, there's been a sort of, you know, longing for these spaces. And it's more specifically because it's a space for me, a space for me to meet with my community, to also meet new people. It's also a way of releasing. And right now those spaces don't exist. And so I think there's a bit of a longing within that. And so I wanted to kind of talk about the narrative of that space and kind of create Playlay A to conceptually represent that space. So the stacking of each of the modulars is a way for me to also represent a large speaker system. And in it, I actually embedded speakers, and I worked with a musician her name's Loka Yesenia, to kind of create a musical score for this piece specifically. So that plays on loop during the exhibition.
I have a comment. I saw Playlay A at NCU, and I immediately thought of how interactive it could be. And I'm so happy I got to see this in a different light, in a different space with different performances.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So to kind of maybe transition out of my own personal work, although this is definitely a part of my overall practice, I wanted to kind of just dive into supplement projects a little bit. which for those of you that don't know, Supplement Projects is a space that I started here in Miami. And it originally started in my home, which was a shared home with a few other roommates in Little Haiti. And what I wanted to do was kind of think about how the domestic space can be a different format in order to sort of engage with art, but also with each other. So it's both kind of an exploration of space and an exploration to also rethink how art could be sort of engaged with. So the first year I got an Ellie's for this project. And most recently I got a Wavemaker to continue the project. And I'll go through maybe a few examples of the exhibitions that happened there, but more specifically, I guess the reason why I started Supplement Projects was I felt that there was a lack of artist ran spaces here in Miami, and there was a need, at least for me, that I felt to create this space. And I think that essentially, you know, there are so many artists here and there's so many ways in which that we can approach sort of showing our work and experimenting, collaborating with one another. And so I just wanted to take an initiative in doing so myself. And I come from a background of that as well. You know, like while I was living in Berlin is a completely different city in which, you know, there's, I think, a lot of encouragement, but no one's telling you or waiting for you to do something. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to do it. And there's tons of artist ran spaces there and a lot of individuals taking a lot of initiatives in doing so. So I think coming from Berlin, then being in Miami, there's something about that experience that's inherently embedded in my way of doing things. So Two and a Possible is a collaboration with my partner, Naja Moon, and originally inspired from Naima Green's Pursuit deck, and is also in partnership with Art.Black. And for this, we wanted to create a table that would be a place of gathering for a group of people, and more specifically, like host a spades tournament with these cards. And we did this during Miami Art Week in 2019. And for that event, you know, we had music that was by Yesenia. We had a barbecue. There was a whole sort of group gathering, and that was really like the basis of the project, is bringing people together, having a comfortable space where people felt that they belonged, and using, I guess, art as a tool within this space. Unsubscribed is another group show, and this was inside my house. And so the sort of works that were there would happen inside and outside of the house and sort of like around it. We had a backyard and everything. There was times that there was things in the kitchen or in the living room or in the bathroom, and really trying to sort of reshape the space as we know it. And this is just more documentation. So yeah, you can see here in the backyard, did a few like film screenings as well. There was talks inside the house. It wasn't a huge space, so it would become kind of crammed really easily, but I think that also was a part of it. To kind of end, I thought I would like to share with you at least a little bit of my process. Here's a few drawings that I'll just kind of go through quickly, of things that haven't necessarily been developed yet or in the making. So this is a drawing that's for my show that's opening up at Locust, which is on March 6th. And in that, you know, I've created this large structure that's about 10 feet tall and 20 feet wide, and is meant to kind of help and gather people together. And more specifically, you know, for this, I am going to be working with 2 dancers and 2 poets and a musician to kind of create a whole live performative piece within this structure. This series that's called How To is a ongoing series that I've been working on for the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, that actually sort of stemmed from inspiration from this poet named Martin Jackson. And he wrote this poetry collection that's called Tutorials. And in that, I've, long story short, decided to make a visual translation of each of his poems. So this has taken me quite a long time, and I'm on the 5th one. So this is the 5th iteration of that.
Sounds great.
Thank you. This is another project proposal that's more for an outdoor installation that's also more architectural as well. Again, I was reflecting on sort of my family and our culture and this idea of being in these spaces that are both inside and outside always simultaneously, and what it means to have a space of gathering, and how important that is for us. And I think a lot of these spaces are always kind of inhabited, both trying to be outside and enclosed in shade simultaneously. And this is another drawing. All of these haven't necessarily been executed yet, but just kind of giving you maybe some insight on my process. I think that's it. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I want to open it up to questions and comments. If anyone would like to, please put it in the chat. But I do have a question. You mentioned your family's culture. What is your family's culture?
My father's Puerto Rican and my mother's Costa Rican.
Okay. So your work is very collaborative, it seems like. You, how has that affected the pandemic and your creative practice? I mean, you're still working with the collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the beginning of the pandemic, I definitely took a hard pause. I was working a lot, and I also really felt that there wasn't any way for me to redo my work than the way that I was doing it. You know, so much of it is about human interaction, so much of it is about bringing people together. And I think over now that it's been about like a year, I've been able to exercise different ways in which I can approach that, considering that we're still in this pandemic. And so a lot of it is kind of rethinking what a live performance can be, and more specifically moving into the realm of film. And so I think that's the way in which I feel like I can navigate through the concepts I want to work with and still kind of have the same synergy.
How has your work evolved since you started practicing art?
Oh my God. Hopefully a lot. I think that it has definitely gone through a lot of different transitions. I can for sure see the kind of string that's tying everything together. But yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of experimentation. I still experiment. I think it's important to do so. I also think that I'm always interested in learning new things and new skills. So that's always a part of my practice. And I think that comes out usually within my work.
Let's see, I have a question here. What are three big themes of your work?
That is a very hard thing to answer. I mean, I think I enjoy creating environments and spaces for people to be in, to kind of reimagine themselves in. I think also too, I'm interested in this idea of participation. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are doing a performance, quote unquote, but I think that just the viewer can be a participant within the work. And I think most recently I'm interested in functionality and also looking at what it means, like what's the difference between public and private space, and actually how much those things kind of intertwine with each other. So I think a lot of my research ends up being there. It always ends up coming back to there.
Thank you. I have a question. What was your breakout moment as an artist? What work made you famous?
Oh my God, I don't think I'm famous. Thank you. I don't know how to answer that. I don't think I am, but I am just doing exactly what I want to be doing. And I think that that's the important thing to remember, is to constantly just stay true to yourself.
Do you have a work that you feel like was that really made you feel like it was complete, that it was actualized to the fullest extent?
I think Playlet A does that. I think that When We Open Every Window has done that. The Locust show hasn't gone up yet, but I feel that that work is already complete in a lot of ways, and that it's fulfilling like how I envision the concept originally in a lot of ways.
That sounds very, and I'm excited to see that work. And I have to say, you have a lot of things going on in your practice. You're being exhibited everywhere, and you're working on several projects right now. So, what else besides what you shared with us? Is there anything else? Is there a project that you really want to do that you haven't had a chance to work on yet?
No, I guess I haven't. I feel like right now I'm working on a lot of projects. It's hard for me to imagine another one on top of that. But and I feel pretty lucky to say that I'm working on a lot of things that I've been wanting to work on for some time.
Nice. Question, you are 100% artist. Are you 100% art, or do you think a percentage of you that could be filled with a designer role?
So I'm definitely an artist that feels that there shouldn't be separations between disciplines. And so I am definitely interested in design. I'm interested in architecture, and I'm interested in a lot of things. But I think that ultimately, whatever medium necessary, and that all the mediums are always crossing and intersecting with one another. And I think that we shouldn't try to categorize ourselves and put ourselves in a box. And so I don't consider myself really anything but a maker at the end of the day.
Okay. With these huge structures, do you usually work on its construction with others? How has that changed since the pandemic?
Yeah, so for the larger structures, I do usually work with a few people, including myself. I'm always most likely a part of the fabrication process as well. And I guess in terms of the pandemic, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, it's a small team. I think, I've done a few performances as well, which is also with a small group of people. And we just play it safe, like we get tested and everybody kind of comes to an agreement as to which sort of protocols that we feel is following, just protocols in general of how to kind of navigate working together safely. Small groups, and everyone wears masks.
I have a question. Are you, as an artist, able to financially support yourself as an artist?
I am able to financially support myself as of right now, and hopefully forever moving forward. That hasn't always been the case. I've definitely worked an immense amount of different jobs. I was not born into money, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. And so, there's been times where I've worked 3 jobs before. I worked all throughout college. I worked in high school. And so, I want to say in the most recent years, I've been able to just fully focus, be a full-time artist, if you will. And a lot of that, I think, comes with time and hard work. And yeah, so currently, yes.
Do you do a lot of, do you do grants, or are you writing, do you do a lot of writing in your practice?
Yeah, so there's a lot of grants. There's a lot of project proposals that go into that. And then there's also applying for additional support if needed, depending on the project.
Okay. I have someone asking for fun. Do you speak German?
I'm really sorry, I don't. I do know some German, but sort of the pros and cons of living in Berlin is, one, everybody speaks English, and primarily because there's people from all over. And so that's great for when you're first living there, but then it's not easy if you're trying to learn the language. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. And someone is asking about your structures and storage. How do you accommodate your works?
I have a nice size studio.
Okay.
And then I try to circulate the works as much as possible.
Okay. I wanted to ask, do you have any advice? We have a lot of students on. Do you have advice for students who want to be artists or creative practices for them? Any advice for them?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is just make a lot of work and experiment. I think never wait for someone to give you an opportunity, make opportunities for yourself. And I also think traveling is an amazing gift. Once we're able to do again, I encourage everybody to live somewhere else for a few years, like live out of the country, live in a different state. I think that there's a lot of growth that can happen for doing something like that.
I think from what you've told me about your practice and everything, so you talk about artist run spaces, and how you say you just have to do things and don't wait for someone to ask you to do something. Like, just show. I think that's part of your success, is that you just do what you want and you make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely just kind of just go for it, for better or for worse. But I think there's a lot of risk involved, but I think that's a part of it. You're not gonna always, I guess, win every time, but that shouldn't be the important factor. I think it's about the fact that you just try to do different things, and go outside of your comfort zone always. And I think that we can forever we're always learning, we're always on a journey. So I think, never thinking that you've completely, fully figured it out is also important. There's always room to grow.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed learning more about your practice. I've seen your work around. I hadn't met you before, but it was really wonderful to hear, and I can't wait to see what happens at Locust Projects. And I have a lot of comments saying they love your work. Thank you so much. And I'm going to invite everyone to unmute yourself if you would like to unmute and say hello, and give GeoVanna a round of virtual applause. So thank you everyone for joining us. Did I unmute? I guess I did. I don't know if I didn't. Did I unmute?
Yes.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, GeoVanna.
Really great.
Yeah, your work is amazing.
Appreciate it.
So
Thank you, Tom, for inviting me. I appreciate that. Your work is amazing. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. That was awesome, GeoVanna.
Thank you. Thank you.